Personal witnessing. Wow, if ever there were two words calculated to send a shiver down a believer's spine, it might be these two. I was fortunate when I first became a Christian because I had some friends take me under their wing and introduce me to the basic skills of discipleship. I learned how to study, pray, memorize, deal with temptation, manage time, and more. And I'm forever thankful for that training. They also tried to teach me how to witness. Their idea of this was to walk up to a perfect stranger, strike up a conversation, shift that conversation towards spiritual things, transition into our personal testimony, whip out our pocket Bible, present the gospel, then make an appeal and urge them to receive Christ in prayer, right there on the spot. This approach, in fact, was being taught on college campuses all over the country. Maybe it still is, I don't know. I do know I gave it an honest try. And to be equally honest, it felt pretty awkward and forced and never quite seemed to work for me. One day I went up to my small group leader and shared how I was struggling with this particular skill and asked if I could tag along and watch him do some personal witnessing. He hesitantly consented, and we set a time. There happened to be a big fair going on at a local park, with plenty of people milling about, which made it the perfect spot. So my friend and I met up there, and I proceeded to follow him around for several hours, watching as he walked up to strangers and tried to engage them in spiritual conversations. To be honest, he didn't have any more success sharing Christ than I had, and he looked almost as uncomfortable. I didn't quite give up on the idea, but it sure seemed something was missing. Yang and Muhammad. I'm actually thankful I had those early difficulties because it motivated me to want to learn more about witnessing. And I continued reading and studying, trying to understand the gospel for myself. And how to lead someone else to Christ. I wrestled with this question for months. One day I was attending a workshop by an old missionary on witnessing, and he gave a powerful presentation along these same lines. And I was inspired once again to give it a try. In fact, that's how he ended his presentation, by urging us to make a commitment to pray every day for 1 week, that God would give us the chance to share the gospel with someone during that time. He gave us all a tract to use and sent us on our way. 7 days, I thought, I can do that. And pray I did, every morning, pleading with God for a chance to share the gospel with someone before the end of the week. Faithfully, I kept that tract in my shirt pocket just in case, and I kept my eyes peeled for opportunities. But as the week progressed, nothing seemed to really open up. So I started praying even more earnestly. But doubts crept in. And by the time I had come home for the evening, at the end of day 7, I had pretty much given up. It wasn't going to happen. But against all odds, there was suddenly a knock at the door. I had befriended a young Buddhist student from Korea learning English, and he had dropped by to introduce me to another student in the English language program he had met, a young Muslim man from Iran. Their names were Yang and Muhammad. So I welcomed them in and we chatted a bit. While we talked, that tract, still in my pocket, started feeling heavier and heavier. And after a few moments, I blurted out something along the lines of, "By the way, would you be interested in learning how to become a Christian?" I cringe now thinking back to my lack of subtlety, but amazingly they both nodded their heads. I was stunned. Pulling out my tract, I double-checked they understood what I was proposing, to ensure they really wanted to go through that tract together. They just kept nodding their heads. So I dove in. I read through it page by page, trying to make sure they understood what it was saying. They kept nodding. Then I got to the appeal page and asked if they wanted to invite Christ into their life. They nodded again. Are you sure? I mean, you want to kneel down and pray for this? More nodding. And then they both got down to their knees. Still stunned, I knelt too, and led them through the sinner's prayer which they repeated after me. Then they got up, thanked me, hugged me, and promptly left. I sat there in silence for a good long while. I was flabbergasted. From that point on, every time I saw Yang, he would introduce me to whoever he was with, as the one who had introduced him to Jesus Christ. Last I heard, he had joined a Korean church and become a youth leader. I continued meeting regularly with Muhammad as well, trying to help him learn how to study the Bible, and I remember, week after week, how amazed he was at how God would speak to him. He got a fair bit of pressure from other Muslims on campus, but he held firm. Eventually, he transferred to another school and I lost track of him. As far as I could tell, their decisions were both sincere. A tragic failure. I wish I could say this kind of thing started happening regularly, but the reality is, I didn't keep up that kind of prayer intensity, and things more or less went back to normal. Until one day a few months later at work. I was working in a fast food restaurant at the time, taking a break in the dining area when I felt a strong impression to go witness to Frank. He was an older employee, on break at the same time, sitting alone on the other side of the room. He was kind of a misfit, a bit antisocial, and nobody really liked him. And to be honest, I didn't want to go over and be seen sitting with him. The impression came a second time, so it caught my attention. Go share the gospel with Frank. I resisted again, making several pointless excuses. Then a third time. And sad to say, I again resisted the impression to go over and talk to him. My break ended, and I returned to work. I didn't think any more about it until the next day, when Frank didn't come in at his usual time. When I asked around, I found out there had been a tragedy. Frank had run into some bad people the night before, and they had shot and killed him. Some kind of bungled robbery or something. Hearing that made me sick to my stomach. I realized I was probably the last person in Frank's circle of contacts, spiritual enough for the Lord to reach out to in that situation. And I had failed him miserably. I determined right then and there, I would never make that same mistake again. I would learn to witness at any cost. So I just kept on reading every book I could find on the subject. I collected every gospel tract I could find to analyze how it presented the plan of salvation. And I memorized every Bible verse on the gospel I came across. I also worked hard to improve my practical skills. I created a short survey designed to lead into a gospel presentation and spent a whole summer knocking on doors in the university housing areas, surveying people, mostly international students, and whenever possible, doing a gospel presentation. I had scores of interesting conversations and shared the gospel again and again. I'm not sure I really saw any fruit that summer, but things did get a bit easier with time and practice. Most importantly, at long last, the gospel finally clicked in my own mind. More on that in a future lesson. Lessons learned. I no longer think that is the only way to witness, or even the best way, necessarily. But I am convinced of at least a couple of things. First, we would have more opportunities to witness if we were better prepared. And if we prayed for more opportunities. God is well able to connect us with hungry and thirsty souls if we're ready to share, and we ask. Second, every believer should be armed with the basics of witnessing, so the Lord can call them at a moment's notice, for any last-ditch salvation efforts He wants. That summer of door-to-door witnessing gave me skills that have come in handy countless times since. And I've had the joy of seeing several people come to Christ. But perhaps most important of all, I discovered that personal witnessing is an essential part of our own walk with God. Learning how to talk to people, how to share our own conversion story, and how to articulate the gospel clearly, these are all keys to a vibrant Christian experience. When these skills are missing, we're left spiritually crippled and weak. In the days to come, we are going to explore these skills. Even if you never get to use them, having them in your back pocket will definitely bring you closer to Jesus. But you never know, God may just bring someone knocking on your door one day, ready to receive eternal life.